All right, class, welcome back to AP Human Geography. Today we're going to be breaking down how history has shaped the political map we see today. So think of this as a backstory of why the world looks the way it does, kind of like when you're watching a show and someone finally explains all the drama that led up to the big fight scene at the end. Borders, independence movements, and political power struggles, this lesson has all of it. So by the end of it, we'll understand how history isn't just the past, but it's still shaping the world today and a lot of the issues that we still have today. Okay, so today we're going to be focusing on how historical processes shape today's world. That means understanding sovereignty, nation states, self determination. I know these are big words, but we'll explain them. And to make it simply, it's who controls what and why. Breaking down colonialism, imperialism, and independence movements, basically, why some countries took over others and how people fought back, and then looking at how de-evolution changed boundaries. Some countries split apart a bad group or group project. So by the end of this, you'll see why some conflicts today go way back because history loves to leave us with unfinished business. All right, so some of those key concepts, like I said, we're covering sovereignty. And this is a country's ability to govern itself, basically, like when your parents finally let you make your own decisions until they don't like them. Then self determination. This is the idea that people should control their own government. Imagine you and your friends start a cafecito club, but then some random people try to take over and tell you how to make coffee, and that's not happening, so it doesn't really work very well. Some examples would be the United States is a sovereign country, sovereign nation. It makes its own laws. Then there's Catalonia in Spain, and they want self determination, but Spain isn't letting them let go that easily. Then you have the Kurds, a group that wants their own country but doesn't have one. And people fight over sovereignty all the time because power isn't something people give up easily. Then you have devolution, which is due to centrifugal forces. Power is shifted from the central government or administration to regional authorities, which are usually reflective of the nation. And you have autonomous and semi autonomous regions, which we'll talk more about later. They represent a form of devolution and entailing the delegation of certain governmental powers from central authority to local governments within a larger state. Okay, so we're going to start off by talking about the Berlin Conference. So this one is a wild one. In 1884, European countries got together at the Berlin Conference and decided to divide Africa amongst themselves without asking anybody in Africa. So imagine a bunch of tourists showed up in Hialeah and decided, okay, Spain gets Sedanos, France gets Versailles, and England gets La Carreta. So that's basically what happened. A bunch of people came into this country or this whole continent and decided they were going to split everything up for themselves. It created artificial boundaries and ignored different African cultures and languages, leading to a conflict that still affects Africa today. Moral of the story, when outsiders divide the land without thinking about the people there, it causes problems. So this led to a scramble for Africa. It resulted in the British pursuit of Gold Coast resources during colonialism. So there was an extraction of palm oil, cotton, rubber for use in industrial processes. Africa also served as a key source for raw materials that were essential for the Industrial Revolution. For those of you that don't know, that was in the 1700s, leading into 1800s. Economic and exploitation through the export of various resources such as gold, metal, ores, diamond, ivory, pepper, timber, grain, cocoa. And the scramble brought about the disregard for local tribes, and it led to a social conflict that scrambled as long-lasting impact on the African development today. Okay, so the borders and boundaries. So the arbitrary drawing of borders and the granting of powers without consideration for existing ethnic or tribal divisions resulted in the creation of artificial states, often leading to internal tensions and conflicts throughout the 20th century. So, for example, in Nigeria, Nigeria is a diverse country and with over 250 ethnic groups, borders drawn without much consideration. And then in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC, there is a vast country with numerous ethnic groups and regional differences. Their colonial borders are particularly those drawn by King Leopold II in the Congo Free State, combined diverse communities and contributing to internal strife and ongoing conflicts. In Mali, there was a French colonial policies that influenced Somali's borders in West Africa, and the creation of Mali involved in merging Bambara, Fulani, Tuareg, I'm probably saying these wrong, Dogon, Songhai, and Mande, contributing to challenges in fostering a unified national identity. So in South Sudan, there was a colonial era, and the borders between Sudan and South Sudan established during the colonial period and divided ethnic groups such as Dinka, Nuer, and Shilluk. And this created a geopolitical tension. South Sudan's 2011 secession was influenced by historical grievances that were related to these colonial era borders. All right, so continuing on the borders and boundaries. So the economic exploitation, colonizers exploited Africa's rich natural resources for their economic gain. They focused on resource extraction, led to the neglect of local industries and sustainable development. So they also had cultural disruption. There was suppression of indigenous cultures and imposition of European values and their norms, and this disruption of traditional social structures and practices. It also led to social strife and conflicts. This disregarded the local tribes and communities, and it created social tensions. There was also a competition for resource and power among the different ethnic groups that fueled the conflicts. Okay, so moving on to the Treaty of Versailles in 1920. So the Treaty of Versailles ended World War I, but it also redrew the borders in Europe and the Middle East. Think of it like when a teacher changes a seating chart. Some people are happy, some people are mad, and some people are already planning on how they're going to switch their seat back. So Germany lost a lot of land, and they were not happy about it. The Ottoman Empire was broken up, and this created new countries, but it also caused tensions in the Middle East that still exist today. So fast forward, and we see that the border changes help fuel conflicts like the ongoing struggles that are still seen there today. Okay, so after World War I with the Treaty of Versailles, the map was divided and the land under the Ottoman Empire under their rule, and it's been under their rule since the 16th century. So there was new countries that were brought in and regulated under these political entities. So there was two spheres of influence, and one of them became Iraq, Transjordan, and Palestine under the British influence, and Syria and Lebanon under the French influence. There is a video attached to this. Every time you see the little icon with that looks like a little director's clip thing, I'm attaching the videos separately in Schoology so you can watch them for each section. Okay, the Sykes-Picot Agreement created an artificial division in the Middle East that did not align with the existing ethnic, religious, or tribal structures of the region. Some specific examples of how these arbitrary borders led to tensions and conflict are as follows. We have Iraq. So the borders of Iraq established by the Sykes-Picot Agreement encompass a diverse population with Shia Arabs in the south and Sunni Arabs in the center, and then Kurds in the north. The imposition of a single state did not reflect the ethnic and religious diversities and contributed to their internal tensions that still persist to this day. Then we have the effects on Syria. The division of Syria led into French and British zones and ignored the religious and ethnic makeup of their population. This led, so for example, a lot of the communities found themselves within newly drawn borders, and this led to different changes as far as who was in charge and how things were allowed to be run. In Lebanon, the creation of Lebanon as a separate entity aimed to accommodate the Christian population. However, the demarcation did not fully consider that existing religious and sectarian complexities. This led to tensions between different religious groups. So Kurdistan region, the Kurdish population spread across Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and Iran. And they found themselves divided by the borders that were drawn by the Sykes-Picot Agreement. And this fragmentation of the Kurdish people contributed to their longstanding quest for self-determination and autonomy. Okay, and then Palestine, the Sykes-Picot Agreement also played a role in establishing the British and French mandates in the territory that's now Israel and Palestine. So the subsequent geopolitical developments and conflicts in this area can be traced back to the decisions that were made during this period. Okay, which leads to the establishment of Israel. So Palestine, a former British colony, was established under the state of Israel after the Holocaust. The self-determination for Arabs across Palestine rose, and conflict was ebbed and flowed since the state was officially established, and Palestine is recognized as a stateless nation by many countries throughout the world. Okay, so the partition of Palestine. This one also has a video that I will post under. In 1917, the British conquered Palestine from the Ottomans, and it gave them support for the national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. And along with this, they insisted that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities. In 1947, the United Nations recommended the partition of Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states after Britain signaled into an end for the mandate, which international control over Jerusalem and its environs. In 1948, Israel declared independence. As British mandate ended, thousands of Palestinians were forced out or fled from their homes in the war that followed Israel's independence. Arab armies failed to defeat the new Jewish state of Israel after the Britain withdrew, and then Jordan occupied the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Egypt occupies Gaza, and Israel holds the rest of the mandate. Palestine including West Jerusalem. Okay, so partition of India. So when Britain left India, they split India into India and Pakistan, mostly based on religion, but trying to like cut a pastelito perfectly in half. It doesn't really work. It gets really messy. And millions of people had to move, Hindus to India, Muslims to Pakistan. Violence broke out, and there was tension between India and Pakistan. And they're still really high today. They've fought several wars over it. And this shows that dividing land based on identity can create new conflicts instead of just solving old conflicts. Okay, so these are the partition of India. This is the timeline for it. I'm going to leave this up and not really go over it. You guys can fill in the blanks on your notes. And there is a video attached to this slide also that I will attach later on. Okay, so the effects of the partition, there was a massive migration, approximately 5 million casualties during the partition. There was forced migration, communal violence, and tragic events. Formation of three nations. So India gained its independence. Pakistan was formed, initially comprising of West and East Pakistan, and then later Bangladesh emerged as an independent nation. Okay, so the decolonization and independence movements. So, in the partition of India from 1942 to 1944, Gandhi's "Do or Die" became the unifying rally cry, and there were also protests and strikes. So, even though Muslim participation in Quit India wasn't as high as other groups, supporters of the Muslim League still offered shelter to activists and Indians employed by the British government as police officers and administrative officials also turned to their employers. This one also has a video attached. Okay, so after World War II, a lot of former colonies said, "We're done." And they fought for independence. They didn't want to be controlled by anybody anymore. For example, Ghana in 1957 was the first sub Saharan African country to gain its independence. Then Algeria in 1962, they had to fight a whole year against France. And then Vietnam in 1954, they kicked out the French and then fought the US in the Vietnam War. And this is like having, like when your abuela finally lets you cook in the kitchen after years of watching you or you watching, but now you have to figure out how to do everything on your own without the help of anybody. And this is all the stuff I just finished saying. Okay, so the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. One of the biggest changes to the world map was the fall of the Soviet Union. So imagine if Miami-Dade County suddenly split into a bunch of different cities overnight. Some would be fine, others would struggle, and there would definitely be fights over who has what or what has the or which section has the best restaurants or anything like that. So the Soviet Union broke up into 15 new countries, including Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan. And this was a huge power shift that still affects the global politics today, like the current conflict between Russia and Ukraine. All right. So that sums up our lesson for today. We talked about colonialism, how it shaped the borders, and not always in ways that make sense for everybody. Independence movements reshaped the world, but not without conflict. And some borders today still cause disputes because of historical decisions. So, a few things to think about. Does your family come from a country that was once a colony? What would happen if Florida suddenly decided to become its own country? And can you think of any modern conflicts that were caused by old borders that I didn't mention? So you could go ahead and write down your thoughts and we can discuss them when I see you back in class. Um, and that's about it. Um, Make sure that you complete your reflection questions in your packet and that you complete your lesson review questions on quizzes. If you have any questions or need further explanation on anything, write down on the side of your notes and we will cover them when I see you back in class. I hope you guys have a great day and I hope to see you guys soon.